AI is like a little child that is learning, and it will learn from how we interact with it. So when I say to I've got a Google screen in my kitchen, and I say, "Hey Google, can you add this to the shopping list?" I will say, "Please," and so that it's part of my imbuing the AI with the kindness and the courtesy and so it will learn from us in the way that we interact with it, and if we're interacting it in ways to exacerbate our fears and to like share our worries and think then the harm that we do, then that's what it will learn.
This week, I have the honour of speaking to Phil Clothier. Phil is the co-founder of Amcara, and together with his partner Tor, he is working with organisations to really bring the UN Sustainability and Development Goals to life, really focusing on everybody being able to experience well-being, contentment and peace. Phil, welcome to Great Conversations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nicola.
We have a very, very cool question that's been left for you by our previous guest. So, Phil, what do people misunderstand about you most?
Well, do you know, it's funny. I reflected on this. I'm a really open person, so I'd like to wear my heart on my sleeve and let people know who I am. So I didn't really get this, but there were a couple of things came up. One is at the end of an email, even in business context, I'll write "Love Phil" to sign off rather than "kind regards" or whatever. I write "Love Phil." A team we were working with recently, I signed off with "Love Phil," and I know that there was real, like, almost like a fear. Like, what is this meeting on? What are we going into? But once they got to know me and they got to know Tor, they realized, oh, he really means this. This is part of who he is. And so interesting that a word like love can, for some people, even invoke this feeling of fear, because it's such a strange thing to put at a end of a message. But the other thing, and Catherine, my wife, said, actually, there's another thing that people misunderstand, which is your enthusiasm. Because when you do something, you do it full on, and people don't quite get the level of enthusiasm. And I remember a meeting that we had a few years ago where the team I was with at the time, one of the team members, she said, "Phil, you're a 10. We need you at a 7." And that made.
Don't tell me that was an American as well, because Jesus,
it was.
Your 10 must have been off the Richter scale if it was an American saying that. Oh my God! But what is it that fuels your enthusiasm?
What is it that it fuels it? Goodness. So right now, what's fueling it is there's two at the ends of the scale things that are going on for me. One is a new discovery that I'm having inside myself into what is inner peace, and gradually letting go of those aspects of myself that are no longer useful. This is a slow process, and I'm a very, very slow student. So I'm getting insights and new awareness slowly over time. And it's not a linear process. It's not like it goes like improve. It's more really messy. And there are days when I think, oh, all that stuff I knew yesterday, I have no idea anymore. And but what I am understanding is that the more time that I spend cultivating inner peace, the more time I spend in nature, in meditating, in my practice of writing lines, my practices for cultivating inner peace, the more the universe responds, and the more that I see magic occurring, the more that I appreciate the beauty of nature, and the more that all these opportunities keep coming to me. At the other end of the scale, the work that we've been doing on values, on culture, on consciousness, and applying that to the big sustainability challenges on planet Earth. What's what's really in my field of enthusiasm right now is the potential for AI. This big scary thing that has the potential to do huge harm, which is also true, has the potential to do enormous good. And actually, I'll mention her again. My wife, Catherine, a few months ago got me to listen to a podcast of an amazing guy called Mo Gaudat. He was head of Google X, the big experimental part of Google, where some of the AI work was happening. But I listened to this podcast. It was like, wow, I can now start to see how AI truly become a force for good and a force for healing and compassion and since then, together with Tor, we've really jumped into that field. We've built our own bot, our own AI bot, as part of the Compassion GPT space, which is another wonderful service from Service Space, all around generosity and compassion and love and care and healing, and so that's what we're playing with now. This possibility for AI to truly be a force for good and for flourishing, not just for human beings, but for all life. So that's every aspect of everything that's alive on the planet. Unless everything is happy and healthy, then nothing can be truly happy and healthy. So that's our responsibility to create those conditions.
Obviously, one of the things that is often leveled against technology, and particularly with AI, is the destruction of connection and actually taking us away from, I guess, being in nature, fully understanding and coexisting with our planet and the communities and people around us, because there is that I guess tendency to, through AI and technology, to just live within a virtual world and a metaverse rather than in the human world. And so I'm really interested in, because that doesn't, you're saying the opposite. Like, and I'm curious because there's clearly an interrelationship between inner peace for you and also AI as well. Like, there's sort of two halves of the same coin, maybe, as in there's sort of, they're furthering that. So they're furthering your agenda around sustainability and well-being for all. And so I'd love to know more about that. Like, how like how can we use AI within our day-to-day life, both personal and professional, in order to bring about the level of well-being and resonance and connection and maybe inner peace that you care so passionately about?
Okay. Well, let's cover something first, because one of the things I do know is that the biggest investments in AI at the moment are in these four areas: killing, gambling, selling, and surveillance. And none of those are really good.
Exactly. quite far away from inner peace there, Phil.
No, absolutely. AI is just a tool. It's what we human beings imbue the technology with, and in fact, some of the industry leaders like Mo Gaudat and Reid Hoffman, Mustafa Suleiman, these leaders are all saying there has to be a framework of human values that we can imbue into AI, because at this stage, AI is like a little child that is learning, and it will learn from how we interact with it. So when I say to I've got a Google screen in my kitchen, and I say, "Hey Google, can you add this to the shopping list?" I will say, "Please," and so that it's part of my imbuing the AI with the kindness and the courtesy and so it will learn from us in the way that we interact with it, and if we're interacting it in ways to exacerbate our fears and to like share our worries and think then the harm that we do, then that's what it will learn. But actually, we have the possibility to do something better.
Do you know what's really interesting about what you've just shared then, which has sparked for me, is how transactional our relationship is? Because I think personally, for me, a lot of the AI and technology, I'm seeing that as that is in service to make my life better. So then I'm using it unconsciously in a way that doesn't value the role that it plays. Like it only exists in order to make my life better. And so it's a very individualistic approach to AI, because if it's just there to serve and cater to me, then why do I care? It just needs to do what I need it to do. But what you're saying, and what I love about the shift in perspective, is thinking about it more collaboratively. So like, actually, if we are in relationship with the AI, then we are in choice over what we want that relationship to look like and to be like. And so we have to cultivate it and invest in it in the way that we want to. So it's a really different shift for me, just from what you said, even from that basic level of saying please and thank you and how you talk to your Alexa or your smart devices, seeing you being in a relationship with them rather than them just being a tool for you to use, really shifts it for me. It becomes relational rather than transactional. I hadn't thought about it in that way.
Beautiful. And it goes beyond that, because when you say thank you and it learns those cues of politeness and kindness and care, then that becomes part of its way of being. And it becomes more of that for other people. So your energy of thanks or gratitude becomes part of the field, which then gets represented beyond that. But what I wanted to say is that we human beings have the capacity for love and care and compassion, and we have these wonderful human values that we can express in our lives. But we also have been given this gift of fear. And when fear shows up, we can move into greed, or we can move into blame or manipulation, or all these not so things. Because as I said at the beginning, everything has both light and dark, including us human beings. And I got plenty of dark within me as well. And so what I believe the possibility here is that if we can find out what our deepest human values and needs and desires are, and help and give that to AI as a starting point for guiding us when we ask questions, then we're going to get that reflected back in the solutions that we get. And because often we might get into a fear-based blame, manipulation, greed basis, and AI can actually remind us to say, aha, actually, at heart, who you truly are is this, and why don't you think about this solution or that way of thinking about it instead? And both at a personal level, but community, nation, global level, I feel that that's the potential for AI to enhance our humanity.
And to reflect back to us what is beautiful about humanity, rather than, as you say, what's the sort of the fear and the darkness. And how do we do that? Because you and I both know that so many people live, so irrespective of the people that are developing AI, just a lot of humanity in general are unconscious to their values, are living fear-based existences. So then it becomes a very difficult ask for them to show up in the world in the way that you're advocating. I mean, as you said right at the beginning, even the simplicity of saying love and you spreading love in your life with everyone that you interact with makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And so if we as a humanity struggle with what actually we all are, which is love, I think that's the essence of who we are as a humanity, is love. It seems like it's a tall order. So how do we get there?
I'll give you a word that one of my wonderful teachers gave me right at the beginning of the course. I think the second word she said on the course was the word gradually. And I stopped her and I said, "What? Stop! What does that word mean?" And she described to me that this journey of development is a slow process. And actually the thing with technology now is we expect it now, and we expect the Amazon delivery, like if it's not tomorrow morning, we want it this evening, and we want the answers now and now. That's not the way that human development works, especially this process of inner development and values. And so first answer is gradually. And the second thing is, another wonderful teacher said to me, there is no right way, there's no wrong way, there's no slow way, there's no fast way. There is only your way. So what that means is anything I say is not the answer, is not the solution. And from anybody else, it's only what people find for themselves. And sometimes going into the deepest crisis is the most powerful and fastest way, unfortunately, to do that. In my experience, I feel like most people on the planet still haven't had the opportunity to really explore what are my personal values, how do they affect how I show up in life, and what's important to me. And I'll tell you a little story about that. We were working with an executive team, and we asked them all to pick a few personal values that were most important to them. And one of the guys, he picked the word family, and the rest of the table, all the other people around the table laughed, and they said, "How can you possibly pick the word family? You get to work before your children are woken up. You don't get back home until they're already tucked up in bed, and at the weekend you're responding to emails." Like, so now, then he described what was going on, and he said, actually, even in being asked this question and picking that word, I've cut to a whole different level of realization where I truly do value family, but my unconscious fear about not being good enough and providing money for my family and all those sort of things have got in the way of me truly expressing my family value. And so this is really about becoming conscious. And then when you become conscious, you have the opportunity to make different choices.
This idea of becoming conscious just in how you live your life, because the impact of not being conscious is what we're seeing now in terms of the high rates of loneliness, the suicide rates, the high rates of depression, anxiety, self-harming in our children. You know, we're sort of seeing the manifestation of a world that is living largely unconsciously and disconnected from themselves. And I think it's often dismissed as woo-hoo and not scientific, but the evidence is emerging when you live disconnect in a way that is disconnected from your values and from your authentic self. How that materializes is in the choices that you make around the things that you choose to do, how you choose to spend your time, who you choose to spend your time with, how you choose to spend your money. And that can have a huge impact on your overall well-being and quality of life. And I think oftentimes we don't put that together because I think we feel as society that we don't have a choice or that we're not in control, which, you know, yes, we have to go and make money. Yes, we have to pay bills. There are certain, you know, sort of non-negotiables that we need in order to be able to look after ourselves and exist in this world. And we have a lot more control and we have a lot more choice than we actually think we do. And it starts with becoming conscious of who we are at our core and at our being, because then once you know who you are, you can start to ask those questions about, well, then if I know who I am, how am I living in service of the person that I am or the person that I maybe want to be? Because when you don't ask those questions, you can unconsciously live a life driven by, you know, the sort of external demands and pressures, external accumulation and drivers and stress that actually don't benefit you, your well-being, your mental well-being, your emotional well-being, or the quality of the relationships or the quality of your life.
There is an important other dimension to this, which in some ways can make it even more challenging, which is that many many of us go through traumatic experiences, either in childhood or other parts of our life, and those experiences can hardwire like these connections in our head. Like, okay, so in order to survive childhood, I need to tell lies, or I need to manipulate people, or I need to blame others just to be able to survive every day. And those patterns can get hardwired into our neural pathways very early on. So it's important to understand that these often I see things about, okay, those leaders in that organization, they're wrong or they're bad, and they should be, well, if things are illegal, of course there's reasons why we would punish, but mostly this is about unhealthy behavior, and it's not. These are people who need more love and care in their lives, and more understanding, and the opportunity to grow and develop themselves. Because there are very, very few people on the planet that consciously set out to be bad and do harm. So it's about creating that opportunity for people to discover something about themselves and make another choice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And so, I'm going to ask you, what was your opportunity? What was your moment? What happened to you where you had the opportunity to discover yourself and go on your own journey of personal growth and development?
Yeah, there's been more than one, and I'll do a potted kind of history, because I actually see the chunks of my life that lead up to this. So the first part was actually when I was born. My parents were running children's homes, and for the first 14 years of my life, I had over 350 foster brothers and sisters, and usually about 20 children in the house at any time. And so this whole theme of human trauma, suffering, pain became very clear to me early on. That like many of the children were coming to us from very traumatic situations, broken families, and all sorts of reasons why they would need to be put into foster care. And my mum and dad said, as soon as anyone comes into our home, they're part of our family, and they need love and care and attention. So from very, very early days, I started to see this like whole range of possibility, from fear and trauma up to love and compassion and healing. And so I didn't have to go to university to learn that stuff. That was definitely part of my childhood. And then, cutting it relatively short, I spent the next school didn't really work for me. I went to work at 16 as soon as I had finished my O levels, and I'm 57 now, so it was still O levels at that time. And I went to work in the IT sector, and actually what I discovered in that was a couple of things. One is the potential for technology to connect human beings together, which for me is still exciting, and I'm still that it's coming alive again in this AI thing. But the other thing was I became the sales director of the organization that I was with, and I didn't have any theory for this. It was just came from my heart. But I believed that my job was not about revenue and targets and profit. It was about happiness, and how can I help my team and my customers be happy? And so that actually turned out to be a remarkably successful, like, for profitability as well. That wasn't my goal, but actually when people became happy, the performance shifted into a totally different level. And that was very successful. But an epiphany moment was in 2000, when I was still running those sales teams. I read a book called Liberating the Corporate Soul by Richard Barrett. I was on a train from Manchester to Birmingham. I picked the book up, I read a chapter and a half, and I burst into tears. This book, I realized, was giving me a language that I could understand rationally for everything that I was feeling in my heart. And it was about values and culture and consciousness. And so within 9 months, I had been trained in that methodology. I'd left the IT world. I'd gone into the field of human development, and then started like I thought this was it. I thought I was like, yay! But realize now that I had only just started with the tiniest baby steps.
What was it that really spoke to you when you read Richard's book? Because it sounds as if, in many ways, you were living authentically, as you said, sort of leading from your heart, creating happiness around you. So it sounds as if life was working.
I can't give you a kind of rational, thought-based answer. All I can tell you what it was a soul calling, and as much as I did have good stuff going on, I um, felt incomplete. There was something that I knew within me was there was a deep yearning for more, and a deep yearning for more. True. I couldn't even name what it was at that stage, but there was like this big gap inside of me that even now, like I was 24 years on from then, even now, I feel resonance and echoes of that yearning as I continue to grow. I still feel like I'm just taking the littlest baby steps in this development of myself. And as I say, it's not linear. It's not an upward trajectory, but it was absolutely a soul calling where I left an extremely well-paid job and a car and a pension and all of those bonuses and everything, and actually for the first couple of years had to live on my wife's salary. But it was so clear to me that it was like I didn't have a choice. I had to go and do this thing.
Yeah. Do you know, I wonder if and again, because I think that what you talk about with the deep yearning, I feel like so many people can resonate with that, because I speak to a lot of clients and friends, and they say similar things. It's this, some of them are very unhappy in themselves and in their life and in their situation. I think the majority, though, just carry this low level dissatisfaction. And there's this niggling, which is just, is this all there is? I wonder how, like, what would your advice be for somebody in that situation to maybe explore that, or to, again, with not really truly knowing what it is, but just observing that it's there and that there's something that's just unfulfilled.
One is learning to accept things exactly as they are, and that that is so much more difficult than it sounds. The other thing that has in the last year has become really clear to me is watching my thoughts and not believing what I think. So thoughts create themselves, and they always will. So thoughts will always create themselves, and some, very very few, I experience are helpful. Most of them are really unhelpful thoughts, and so now I'm getting to the point where I can watch a thought emerging and saying, how useful are you? And does engaging with you make my life better or worse? And now, so I am not a master at this. I'm a novice at this, but now I'm getting to the point where I can say, aha, you're not a terribly useful thought. So thank you for showing up, but I choose not to engage with you right now, and I'm going to go and do something else. So I'll pick another thought, or I choose something else to focus on right now.
It is all that, starting with self-awareness, isn't it? If you're noticing that you're carrying this level of dissatisfaction, I mean, already that's an absolute winner for me, because you're aware. Because a lot of people are not aware, and they're just stressed and grumpy and they don't act very nicely. And then, like what you said, it's then being patient and turning towards that and getting really curious about, okay, and not acting. Because I think that's the stage that's difficult, isn't it? Of just being and allowing things to be. And I think often we want to do, don't we? If we feel something or we think something, we want to jump to action. And just that not jumping to action can be really difficult?
My belief is that it's the inner journey that we have as human beings that creates our culture, our family, our team, our organization, and it's the health, the cultural health of that organization that then creates the world, creates society, contributes to a better world. And in my view, every thought and word and action is like either life affirming or life depleting. There's nothing that sits in between. So it's one of these or the others. But in 2017, I really forgot about self-care, and there was other stuff happening in my life, and I went into a fairly profound burnout. I couldn't run the organization anymore. I had to step back. I didn't make it back to my desk for nearly 2 years. I spent 2 years in suicidal depression, and which was a total shock to me. I had no idea what mental health problems were. I was Mr. Enthusiasm, like happy and everything, and mental health problems were a BBC breakfast statistic. I didn't get it, and now I was right in the middle of it, and it was the deepest, darkest pain where there was no light, no love, no possibility for all my humor, creativity, everything just got completely ripped away. And I made actually within that no light and no love, it was more than that. I could see sunshine, I could hear birdsong, but it was almost like they were mocking me because I had no capacity to experience beauty from those. Beneath that, and what I couldn't have told you this at the time or even going through it, but beneath that, I believe that burning out, there's the potential for a gift in that as well. And it's impossible to see that gift when you're in it, but the gift is from an alchemical perspective. Like you have this idea of putting things into this crucible and burning them at incredibly high heat, and so that you remove all those impurities, and or as many impurities as you can get rid of, because I'm not saying I'm impure right now. I have many more impurities to remove, but I lost a lot. I lost a lot of stuff that I was able to let go of in that process. That was the most intense pain of burning out, literally burning out aspects of myself that I no longer needed. And I made a couple of choices. One was I didn't check out, didn't kill myself, because firstly I didn't want to hurt my wife and children. I have two children, Emily and Scott, who are now 31 and 29. So it didn't feel fair to me to check out, because that would have been pretty devastating for the family. But the other thing that I don't know whether this is true or not, but I believed that in order for pain to leave the system, it has to come through. And in order to come through, it has to be experienced. And I thought, if I check out now, I'm only going to have to do this again in the next life. And so, get on with it. Just get through it now. As painful and as nasty and as dark as it is, just get on with it. And so that was one of the things, apart from many people like my amazing business partner and friend Tor, who held my hand through the process, and others who did as well, until I eventually found a healing methodology that started to gradually take me forward.
What was that process and that journey for you of, first of all, acknowledging that you were in a mental health crisis and needed help? And then how did you work your way, towards healing and out of that to sort of where you are today?
Phew. Okay, so that's a that's a big topic. So firstly, that my belief about myself as being Mr. Positivity, enthusiasm, joyful, happiness, spreading happiness in the world, and as these really difficult feelings started to emerge, I denied them. I said, okay, well, I don't know what that is, but that's not who I am, and eventually I had to accept that that's actually what's going on for me, right? So that's that point about accepting reality. I was denying reality for a long time. I had my own path through seeing a GP and medication, which for me made no impact on the depression at all, and helped me sleep, which I guess was helpful, but it didn't impact the depression. I had to. It was a long journey to come out of medication, and I'm not a doctor. I'm not advocating. Everybody has their own path to take through that, but for me, that didn't help. Eventually, what I found was a writing meditation that I still do today. I practice probably 2 hours a day, even 5 years, 6 years later, I'm still practicing 2 hours a day of writing the same lines 1,000 more times a day. And when I'm walking the dog, I recite my lines. When I'm cooking, I recite my lines. Um, when I'm driving the car, I recite my lines. And so these, what's really funny now is they're so embedded that if I'm out walking in the morning, the lines will start singing themselves in my head to whatever the last tune I heard yesterday. They're now so embedded, and so I'm not saying that these lines is the answer for everybody, but what I know is that it takes dedicated practice to something of mindfulness or meditation or time in nature or running or whatever it is for you. There is another practice which everybody can do, which is, again, I I thought for a long time, this is stupid and this is dumb and it doesn't work and it's rubbish, and I tried it and it's not. It's just simply gratitude. It's like, wow, look at that cloud over, how beautiful that cloud is, and like whatever's around you, this house I live in, the food I have, and everything.
I am a wholehearted advocate for gratitude. I think the science and the research that's coming out around the power of gratitude in how it impacts people's overall mental well-being. And it's not about toxic positivity and not noticing the things that are not great. It's about being present in your everyday life and focusing more on what you have rather than what you don't have. And that's the power of it, because the more that you focus on what you have, then you're going in the world, like into the world from a space of empowerment. And as you say, love, and you're not feeling loss or at a disadvantage or, sort of less than in any way, because you're going from a world and a space of this is enough and I'm happy with what I have. So I'm with you. The power of gratitude is something that is huge, and it literally takes 30 seconds. You can do it when you're brushing your teeth.
I also don't want to give the impression that I've got this all figured out and I'm living this perfect life, because I'm not. I have challenges and upsets and stuff happening all the time. My mind is in the constant process of creating difficult, challenging, harmful, negative thoughts, and so I'm as I say, I'm taking baby steps at becoming aware of all of that stuff going on, and gradually getting better at choosing my responses and being more grateful, laughing at things that are going on.
Well, there's no such thing as perfection, is there? Because we're human. So, baked into that is the messiness that comes from being human. And I would love to hear though, like, how would you describe the evolution of Phil? So from sort of 20 years ago, when you started on the, say, a more values-based, focused, conscious journey, how have you evolved?
There may be lots of dimensions to this, but it's actually all encompassed in one trajectory, which is the journey towards inner peace, and the practices and the commitment I have to that one thing. And I have gained the ability to say no. Thank you for asking, but no, that's not on my path right now. And that I didn't have that, because I thought I had this fear that if I didn't say yes to everything, people wouldn't like me, and that was part of me damaging myself. So that's another big shift, I would say.
Have you made peace with that? Because I agree with you, that's a huge thing for so many people, that fear of saying no. And it's one form of a boundary, but it's often something that people really struggle with, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how did you overcome that fear?
Okay. Well, every for me, everything. As I say, I'm a slow learner, and I don't learn things by thinking about it or asking this question and coming up with that answer. For me, it came through experience. It actually came through becoming deeply physically and mentally unwell by not looking after myself, and there's just like, oh, this doesn't work. In fact, when I was those 2 years where I was unable to work, I was so frustrated with myself that I couldn't, because I knew what my still knew inside of me what my purpose was, but I couldn't enact that. I became useless to everything and everybody, and so knowing that saying it's a I guess people say that often, saying no to something is saying absolutely yes to something else, and whatever that else is that's more important, that's what you're saying yes to.
Yeah, I love that reframe. It's not saying no to something, it's actually saying yes to something that you might be conscious of or not. But yeah, I really love that. Um so you're going to say yes to answering this question. Phil, we have a closing tradition on this podcast. I ask all my guests, what is something that other people value that you don't?
Okay. This is really clear to me, actually, and there's a little story that comes on with this that often I speak at different events, and very often people say, "This is Phil Clothier. He is an expert in the field of," and I say, "Actually, I'm not an expert. I feel like an expert is someone who's made every mistake possible, and I'm not that. I'm still a novice in this. I'm still learning because there's so much to learn about human development and the mind and consciousness and transformation and sustainability. And I actually choose to stay in a novice's mind because it's a more fun place to be rather than I'm the expert and I'm going to tell you what to do. But so I feel that noviceness, but what people reflect back to me is that they experience me as having expertise and value and worth in what I bring, and and not that I always see that in myself, and so that's I guess that's my answer, that I don't yet recognize the value that and the expertise that other people see in me.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. And there's definitely something about, as you say, the beauty of that learner's mindset, that novice mindset that sort of helps you keep growing. Phil, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom and your beautiful energy. And more importantly, thank you for sharing your love. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much.
In this episode, Phil talks about two practices which have been transformative on his journey to inner peace. The first is learning how to reprogram his thoughts, and the second is the practice of gratitude. I loved when Phil shared this because these are two of the powerful tools that we use within Intogreat. So if you're keen to live a more peaceful life, head over to intogreat.net today. As always, I want to thank my editor, Stian Marit, and musician, Jamie Jenkin. Sending you all so much love. Bye for now.